The Brothers Karamazov, Book 1, Chapter 4. There are four major characters, each of those characters identifying a major worldview, a major way of being in the world. There are four major characters in the novel. In Book 1, Chapter 1, we met Fyodor, a life governed by sin. In Book 1, Chapter 2, we met Dmitri, a life governed by emotion and passion. In Book 1, Chapter 3, we met Ivan, a life governed by rational thought and hard natural sciences. And now in Book 1, Chapter 4, we meet Alyosha, a life governed by Christian faith. And we get more of the setting, not the geographical setting, but the time setting here at the beginning of Book 1, Chapter 4. Alyosha was 20, his brother Ivan was 24, and Dmitri was 27. So you see the boys are all in their spread out over their 20s, from college age to young adulthood. And then we're going to set Alyosha's religious faith, what it is and what it isn't. First of all, I must explain that this young man, Alyosha, was not a fanatic, and in my opinion at least, was not even a mystic. I may as well give my full opinion from the beginning. He was simply an early lover of humanity, and that he adopted the monastic life was simply because at the time it struck him, so to say, as the ideal escape for his soul struggling from the darkness of worldly wickedness to the light of love. And the reason this life struck him in this way was that he found in it, at the time, as he thought, an extraordinary being, our celebrated elder Zosima, to whom he became attached with all the warm first love of his ardent heart. But I do not dispute that he was very strange even at that time, and that he had been so, even from the cradle. So I'll just point out at this point, and maybe flesh this out later, I just want to point out that the narrator, it seems important to him to tell us that Alyosha's Christian faith is not from some supernatural, mystical, ultra superstitious place, but rather love. And so there's a lot of different type of Christians across the spectrum. There are the Pentecostal, super spiritual type. There are the liturgical, historical, formal types where it's all religion and very little spirituality. And then there's the all spirituality, very little religion types of Christian denominations. And the narrator wants to tell us that Alyosha is not overly interested in speculation or spirituality, but rather love. And that his love finds a place most naturally in Christianity because a great teacher happens to be at the monastery near their hometown, a Father Zosima, who we will hear about quite a bit. He actually dominates book 2 of the Brothers Karamazov. So this chapter, we go on to learn about this saint, almost, Alyosha. Now, he's not concerned with mysticism, and his earliest memories are of his mother. And the particular memory of his mother is a time when he was awakened, and it seems like it was dark, and a light shone in from behind her head, and he remembered her countenance and the terror that she was in, the anguish she was in, no doubt, from being married to Theodore. Now this image has struck Alyosha because it's kind of a double symbol. Not only is he painting the picture of his mother Sophia as the Blessed Virgin Mary, but she's even holding an image, an icon of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And so when Alyosha, this saintly figure, his first memory, when he thinks back to his mother, he thinks of her in terms of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And for Orthodox Christianity, the Virgin Mary is just as important, and I think in some ways maybe even more important than the Virgin Mary is in the Catholic tradition, in that she is the gracious one, the forgiver of all sins, And so when Alyosha thinks of his mother, he thinks of Mary, and he thinks of Mary in the Orthodox theological way as the all-forgiver of sins. And so what does that make him? Well, we get the story about this saintly schoolboy, Alyosha. It makes him just like his mother, who is just like the Blessed Virgin Mary, and he doesn't get into the same type of fights that most schoolboys get into. When he's made fun of on the playground, he doesn't take a personal offense. And it's not that he's this overly spiritual person, it's that he thinks so little of himself all the time that he genuinely isn't offended when the other boys pick on him. In an hour later, they're fast friends again. And the other boys see that he's pure, see that he's courageous, and of course try to pervert and corrupt him. And he just doesn't judge them. He doesn't fall for their depravity or their schoolboy antics. But yet, as he's holy, as he's set apart, as he's this young little schoolboy saint, he's also not judgmental either. He's just like the Blessed Virgin Mary. He's just as like his mother Sophia. He is pure, he's holy, but he is not a Pharisee. He doesn't walk around with his nose stuck up. That is manifested, I think, in the very next paragraph by he moves from Alyosha as a schoolboy to Alyosha at the present. He is such a saint that he can live with his father, Fyodor, without even judging him. And if you were to look at it, you would think that he actually loves and cares about Fyodor, his father. So in the previous chapter, it was amazing that Ivan could live with Fyodor and they could just get along. And now this is pushed even further. Not only can he, like Ivan, get along with his father Fyodor, it even seems like he likes them. And so, like the Virgin Mary, like his mother, he's a saint, but he's a saint who seems to not be capable of judging or looking down on anyone. Now you remember what brought Dmitri, little Mitya, and what we said about Ivan in the previous two chapters. What brought Dmitri back to our town? Well, it was money. He thought he was due an inheritance. And so Dmitri is governed by passions, but his passions have to be funded some way. His emotional life has to be funded by the inheritance that thinks he is due it from Fyodor. So Dmitri, he's maybe not completely driven by money, but money is necessary for what he is driven by. Then in the next chapter, which was our previous chapter, we saw Ivan rising above his contemporaries in struggling to live while they were in school by publishing articles. And so money was at least important to Ivan to be able to complete his education. So we see from the Karamazov brothers that for both Dmitri and Ivan, money played a somewhat, if not very important role in their late teens and early 20s. Contrasting those brothers with this saintly portrait, not only is he pure, not only does he not judge people for their lack of purity, but Alyosha, Alexei, seems completely unaware of money. You know, in the story that ends with Jesus saying, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's and render to God the things that are God's. The beginning of that story has the religious leaders coming to Jesus and asking whether his disciples should pay taxes to Caesar or not. And before Jesus says, render unto Caesar those that are Caesar's and render to God those that are God's, there's a little tiny scene that sometimes is overlooked, and that is Jesus asks for a coin before he asks whose icon, whose image is on the coin. In other words, money is so irrelevant to Jesus that when the question is asked, he doesn't go to his purse, he doesn't go to his pockets. Pockets hadn't been invented yet. Jesus doesn't go into his purse and say, well, let me look at this coin before I answer your question. No, Jesus is so on his mission to love people and to not be judgmental, just like Alyosha, that he is consumed with those things and he is not consumed with money at all. And so our saint Alyosha is just like Jesus. He's pure, he doesn't judge, he's all forgiving, and he's completely unconcerned with money. what is he doing back in our town? Now you remember, Dmitri is back for his inheritance. Ivan is back because Dmitri has written to him for a secret motive that we know a little bit about, which is Ivan has come to mediate the dispute between Fyodor and Dmitri. So we know why Dmitri is back for money, and we know why Ivan is back because Dmitri wants him back. But why is Alyosha back in our town? Well, it seems like two reasons. It seems like all of a sudden one day he had this notion that he absolutely had to see his mother Sophia's tombstone, and we find out our faithful servant Gregory, who pulled Dmitri out and changed his shirt when he was 3 years old and helped out Alyosha when he was 3 and Ivan when he was 7. Now Gregory, in this chapter, he's the one that put up the headstone over Sophia's grave. So Alyosha is back finding his saintly mother on a mission, on a journey to find his saintly mother's grave and to go sit there and remember her and be inspired by her story, by remembering her. And while he's back, he wants to join the monastery, become a monk, because of the great teacher, almost a Master Yoda type figure that dominates Book 2, as we said, Father Zosima. And so Zosima is more of a mystic than Alyosha is, but more on that in 1 second. Let's look here at the end of chapter 4. Alyosha has just told his dad, Fyodor, that he doesn't want to return and finish his last year of schooling. Instead, he wants to stay at Fyodor's town and go to the monastery that is close to it to learn from the father Zosima. And so this gives the foolish, crass, mean, terrible, sinful Fyodor a chance to give his thoughts on the Christian faith. So this is Fyodor responding to his son, Alyosha, who wants to be this saintly monk, studying from this Master Yoda figure, saintly monk. This is Fyodor's systematic theology about the Christian faith. I'm awfully stupid about that. You wouldn't believe it. Awfully. You see, however stupid I am about it, I keep thinking from time to time, of course, not all the while, it's impossible, I think, for the devils to forget to drag me down to hell with their hooks when I die. Then I wonder, hooks? Where would they get them? What of? Iron hooks? Where do they forge them? Have they foundry there of some sort? The monks in the monastery probably believe there's a ceiling in hell, for instance. Now I'm ready to believe in hell, but without a ceiling. It makes it more refined, more enlightened, more Lutheran, that is. And after all, what does it matter whether it has a ceiling or it hasn't? But do you know there's a damnable question involved in it? If there's no ceiling, then there can be no hooks. And if there are no hooks, it all breaks down, which is unlikely again, for then there would be none to drag me down to hell. And if they don't drag me down, what justice is there in the world? You'd have to invent it. Those hooks on purpose, for me alone. For if you only knew, Alyosha, what a blackguard I am. Now this is humorous, but it's also sad. This is one of the reasons that Fyodor can't believe in Christian theology, because the demons, when you die, they have to pull you down to hell with hooks. And what would they hook the hooks on? Because hell doesn't have a ceiling, and if hell doesn't have a ceiling, then there can't be a hell. And so this is Fyodor's rational approach to the Christian faith. Now, what's going on here? Other than showing us what a boob, what an imbecile, what a moron Fyodor is. What's going on here? Well, I think what we have here, and we have with all our 4 main characters, we see that there is a double who acts as a, maybe not a foil, but acts as an extreme, ridiculous version of what they are. Let me explain. If you wanted to properly characterize, if you wanted to properly embody a worldview, you don't want to use the most extreme version of that worldview. And so if I wanted to create a character who was on the right politically in America, I wouldn't use a far right white supremacist extremist. I would use a character that was more in the middle, more embodies middle class values. And if I wanted to create a character on the left of the political spectrum in America, I wouldn't use some Antifa a person who is looting instead of protesting. What I would do is I would choose a more central position, someone who actually represents the mainstream, the majority, and that way my characters would be fair. And so I think what the narrator, what Dostoevsky is trying to do, is fairly represent Fyodor as embodying a fleshly Epicurean worldview, Dmitri as a romantic, passionate worldview, Ivan as a rational worldview, and Alyosha as an existential Christian worldview. But one of the ways to present each of those four positions is to have a double character, have another character that also embodies that position, but to make that character a little bit absurd and a little bit extreme. And when you have a character that is also defined by sin, defined by romanticism, defined by rationalism, defined by Christianity, and they have a more extreme version, what does that do? It makes your main character's version of their worldview more plausible. In other words, the double, being a ridiculous parody of the real character, makes the real character seem like a more even-handed approach to that character. So, when we're in the middle of this novel and some of the worldviews, particularly the rational worldview, is being contradicted to, contrasted with the Christian worldview, you have a very serious, one of the greatest portrayals of the struggle between philosophy and theology, rationalism and Christianity, the Christian worldview and a more naturalistic worldview. That can be taken seriously on its own terms, but it can especially be taken seriously when it's contrasted with this foolish comment that Theodore just made about hooks and roofs in hell. And I think that's also how Father Zosima functions for Alyosha. So, for Ivan's rationalistic worldview, sometimes Fyodor can stand as a double and have some also rationalistic objections to Christianity. But his rational objections to Christianity are so absurd and stupid and foolish that they actually lend credence to Ivan's intellectual, rational criticisms of Christianity. So, Father Zosima, this Yoda-like monk, teacher, supernatural, mystical figure, does the same thing for Christianity. He's such an extreme version of a Christian that by contrast, Alyosha's seems like a more mainstream, a more beautiful, a more attractive character. So I think doubling characters, one of the things that it can do in the hands of a great artist like Dostoevsky through the voice of the narrator is create absurd characters that make the main characters seem more balanced and more nuanced, and having a parody version of a rationalistic argument makes Ivan's actual rationalistic arguments land all the better.